The 14-hour overnight train ride from the sleepy border town of Chelm, Poland to Kiev is one of only a handful of ways you can get to one of Europe's great capital cities during the war. Hour upon hour through villages, farms, factory towns, wide open fields and forests. It's also on these trains that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fled the country at the outset of Russia's invasion on February 24th. Some on this very train, in this exact cabin, their lives upended. Kiev itself is a classically beautiful European capital city of almost 3 million people. Stunning old buildings, modern new ones, restaurants, clubs, museums, people out going about their day. And as a visitor to the city on a beautiful September day, you get a sense of normalcy at first. But that sense of normalcy starts to disappear a bit as your traveler's eye takes in the details of the city in its current state. The number of people in fatigues, the sandbagged and concrete-enclosed statues, concrete blocks and welded-together steel I-beams used to obstruct and derail tanks are scattered around the city, ready to be pushed into the streets. And below the Independence column in Maidan Square in the center of the city is a little grassy knoll filled with Ukrainian flags with the names of the dead from the war written on them. In a war whose intent seems in part to erase Ukrainian culture, it's that culture itself that has risen up to help unify the country. All of the artists, musicians, curators, satirists, all using their talents to contribute in any way they can to help galvanize Ukrainians in the fight for the survival of their country, both its proud heritage and its potential future. And it's because of that cultural front that we're here in Ukraine. Our first stop is at Mystetsky Arsenal, one of the most prominent museums in the country, to meet with its director. Mystetsky Arsenal is the largest cultural museum in Ukraine, housed in a massively impressive building that used to be an actual arsenal and fortification well into the 20th century. And this is the museum's director, Olesia Ostrovska-Liuta. She holds and has held several board and committee positions over the years and has a master's in cultural studies. Because cultural centers have been targets during the war, the museum removed and hid all of its artworks. But in normal times, it's an incredibly vibrant place. Arsenal discusses what's valuable in society, often focusing on social debates, digging into those issues through the lens of contemporary art.
And we also try to uncover what is unknown in culture to our audiences, and paradoxically, that's often the Ukrainian culture. Because through the 20th century, Ukrainian culture was really hidden until 1991, when Ukraine gained its independence. You couldn't speak about many issues, both political and cultural. And that led to a situation where you have quite little knowledge about many phenomena. The Ukrainian language was banned from public usage in the 19th century. You couldn't teach it in school, you couldn't publish books in Ukrainian, you couldn't publish
in the
notes.
19th century?
Yes, by Tsarist Russia. Lenin thought it was impossible to keep Ukraine within the Russian body without giving Ukraine some autonomy. Therefore, they started this Ukrainization policy, which meant keeping bureaucracy in Ukrainian language, introducing Ukrainian language to school. You had Ukrainian theaters, Ukrainian writers, Ukrainian publishing houses.
Boy, there was a lot going on in the 20s.
Exactly. There was a very fruitful period, which ended with a huge massacre.
In the 30s with Stalin's purges.
Exactly. He executed Holodomor, which is political famine in Ukraine, which took up 4 million deaths, to curtail this Ukrainization policy, to make Ukraine more homogeneous with Russia. When Stalin introduced a social realist doctrine, authors that were not social realists were physically executed. And those were hundreds of Ukrainian cultural figures, hundreds.
Cultural leaders of all types, from writers, educators, musicians, artists, were all at risk of imprisonment or execution, and their works destroyed.